Gavin Rice joins us. He's head of political economy at Onward. He's also a former special advisor to the Brexit Secretary. A very good morning to you, Gavin.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us. Let's talk just specifically with you right about now about migrants arriving and migrants possibly leaving, and various stories in the papers today. One, that the Prime Minister is planning this legal crackdown on migrants exploiting the right to family life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This also as a Kemi Badenoch is pledging to revive a Rwanda-style scheme and looking at leaving the ECHR. I mean, I don't know how many times we can see these headlines: another crackdown, smashing the gangs, stopping the boats, you name it. Do you think there's actually any hope that a crackdown on particularly the use of Article 8 in these asylum tribunals and in courts could make a difference?
Well, I think it's very good that the government is at least conceding in its rhetoric that there is a problem with this, which is something that actually Labour have been very reluctant to do until now. It sounds very nice and very friendly, the right to a family life, but then you read about stories that you may have seen in the news today. One of the examples that was used following the announcement was that there was a Jamaican foreign national offender who'd already committed a crime, who made a successful appeal against deportation under the right to a family life, who went on to commit a murder only a few weeks later. So it's good that they're committing, that they're accepting that this is actually a problem. I think one of the problems with both Keir Starmer's approach and also with what I've seen of what the Conservatives have suggested so far is that they don't get to the root of the problem. They're trying to kind of carve out exceptions to our legal obligations under the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. But ultimately, that is an international treaty which the UK has signed up to as a matter of international law. You can try and carve out as many domestic carve-outs as you like, but whilst you are fundamentally part of that convention, you are always going to get overruled.
Well, it was, the thing is, I've read out that, I won't read it again because it'll bore my audience, but Article 8, the right to respect for private and family life, there should be no interference by a public authority about this right, except, and then it gives a whole raft of reasons why you don't have a right to private and family life. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, for instance, that right could be superseded by you being sentenced to prison. You don't have a right to a family life if you've committed a crime that needs prison sentence. It is utterly bizarre to me that judges who apparently are all, top Oxford students are unable to actually read the second paragraph of the article and actually see that it's quite clear that if there is a need to protect the interests of national security or prevent disorder or crime, or protection of rights and freedoms of others, most of these people would be deported, certainly all foreign criminals automatically. So the issue isn't necessarily the convention, it's the interpretation, I would say misinterpretation of this article that is the problem. And that is a problem with activist judges. They're the problem, not the actual convention.
Well, I do think the judges are a problem, and particularly the immigration tribunal judges seem to be a particular problem. The issue is that it isn't only this one right, it's the way that the different rights interact. So there's also this thing called, it sounds very techie, but the principle of non-refoulement. And this was the issue with the Rwanda scheme. You cannot send someone away, you cannot deport them to another country where they could be at risk of mistreatment if they're in a country where they have the death penalty, where they could be tortured, or where we just don't trust their legal system.
Or sent back to their own original home country.
Well, no, exactly, and if we don't basically trust, or the court in Strasbourg doesn't trust the integrity of that system, or thinks that it might use cruel methods or cruel punishments, then there is no carve out. Even on the national security grounds, that right is absolute, and that means that we cannot deport people who come here illegally, and crucially foreign national offenders who've come to the country and committed crimes.
And basically most of the countries that people have been looking at to deport people to, whether it's Rwanda or Albania or wherever, are countries which we don't really trust the legal system of. If they were really functioning high-level countries, they wouldn't be happy to take the people we don't want. I mean, let's just be honest about that. I mean, Kemi Badenoch is talking about, being about the Rwanda-style scheme. I was always the view they had a right to do it, but I didn't think this was on the scale that would make any difference. There's some evidence this week that it did have some sort of deterrent effect. But she's also talking about a review into whether we should leave the European Convention. Is that just sort of too slow, too little, too late from the Conservatives, especially as we see Nigel Farage and Reform, on their heels?
Well, it's good to see that they're not just looking at reviving a Rwanda-style scheme, but they are actually going to review the ECHR question more broadly. I think that's something that probably should have happened sooner. What Rwanda was basically an attempt I would argue, a pretty brave attempt by Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, to sort the problem without leaving the ECHR, because he knew that the support and the numbers within the Parliamentary Conservative Party were simply not there for that. So he was really kind of attempting to square the circle. But the Conservative Party is now in a fight for survival. And one of the main things that has been sinking it was the fact that it failed to get a grip of the border question and the small boats.
Well, apparently we're going to get it all sorted now because France has pledged to come up with a plan within the next 6 weeks to intercept migrant boats. They call them taxi boats, effectively, at sea for the first time. We've always been told they can't do that. They're going to have some sort of legal change. We've already had the French unions for the police going, oh, no, you cannot do this. You'll put us at risk. Do you think that'll ever happen?
We shall see. I mean, I've always wondered why the French so far seem to have been pretty happy to allow illegal migrants who've passed through France, which is a safe country, to come on to the UK. I think the reason is that once they get here, it's then our legal problem in international law, not France's problem. That's just probably my prejudices about the French.
No, I mean, they're rather open about it, aren't they? Say it is our problem. In the same way, when the Rwanda scheme was scrapped and they all started wandering off to Ireland, my view was, that's your problem now.
Well, and this is, again, the craziness of the international law, which is that once someone gets to your country, it becomes your problem, regardless of where they came from or which countries they've passed through. We'll see whether the French plan actually goes anywhere. But I mean, I don't know if you saw Dominic Cummings's long interview the other week where he talked about. Yes, I mean, it was very interesting, although it was rather long. And he said, ultimately, operationally, it's pretty easy to stop the boats. You just turn them round, or you take the people on board to an island somewhere and sort it out later, but you don't allow them to come on shore. The problem is that policy would just be blocked by the courts, and you would end up being dragged before Strasbourg. So maybe this is kind of an interim measure, but I can't see a world in which there are not legal consequences for it.
There's no doubt at all there are political consequences, though. We saw the political consequences. It wasn't even cost of living was a massive issue as well. The NHS delays as well, and weariness with the Conservative government after the last 14 years. But certainly immigration, failure to stop the boats, mass legal migration as well. Huge big issues at the last election, and there's no doubt at all they will continue to be big issues. Big issues for this government, though, and we can see the political pressure coming from Labour MPs, not just floating voters, has been this issue of the winter fuel payments, and Rachel Reeves basically has had to sort of back down on her plan to sort of take winter fuel payments away from 10 million people. Yesterday, she submitted, after a U-turn from the Prime Minister at P&Q's last week, that the payment's going to come back this year, this autumn, for all 10 million pensioners who lost it, but 5 million of those will have it clawed, some of it clawed back in taxes. She's also been in battles, Rachel Reeves, we understand, with Ed Miliband, the Net Zero Secretary, and it turns out, against all our hopes, she has lost those battles. He's going to carry on with a load of his insane targets, putting the country into even more debt. In terms of where this government is politically, as someone who was a special advisor in a recent government, I mean, they are. I've never seen a government make as many sort of mistakes, self-imposed mistakes on their own, and seen their popularity wane so quickly. What do you make of it?
I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's, I don't want, obviously I'm not a Labour person. There's obviously some schadenfreude in seeing them fail, but I also don't want this country to be governed badly. And it does just astonishingly directionless. It seems as though the only overriding principle that they've been trying to pursue, if there's one at all, is the idea that they want to try and balance the books. Rachel Reeves is basically a bit of a bean counter. She wants to make sure that the kind of the fiscal targets are being met. The problem is, every single time they make a cut, which they say is necessary in the interests of prudence and controlling public spending, they then seem to U-turn later. And on winter fuel payments, I know the Conservatives have been attacking them over it, and I understand politically why you would do that. They are the opposition. I think there is a real genuine question to be asked about the affordability of every pensioner, regardless of how rich they are or regardless of how high income they might be, getting it when we are in obviously quite tight fiscal circumstances, and they're clearly just unable to to pick a policy and stick to it. So it's extraordinary that they're U-turning.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Gavin Rice, great to talk to you, Head of Political Economy at Onward, former Special Advisor to Brexit Secretary. Thanks for that. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that. In terms of these U-turns by the government in these announcements, there does seem to be an extraordinary lack of thinking through of policies. And given they had 4 years, and Keir Starmer was, leader of the opposition for 4 years. Yeah, there were other things going on, lockdown, Ukraine war, and the like. They've had an awful lot of time when they were ahead in the polls, where it was likely they would win. They didn't seem to have actually kind of planned anything.
They didn't do any thinking whatsoever. Before the election, I was talking to someone who's on the Labour front benches about various policies, and he said to me, "No, we're not doing any planning. We will wait until we get in. We will see how the lie lands.
Find that £22 billion black hole.
We can't. We'll blame the Tories for everything, and we'll get away with that for the first 2 years."
This cabinet minister told
this cabinet
Are they
minister,
in the cabinet now?
They're in the cabinet now. Physically told me this and said we can blame the Tories for the first 3 years. That'll allow us to get to the second run.
I don't think 3 years is going to wash.
And we can't be held to account because we haven't put any plans out there.